doesn't matter all the things I acquire or all the other stuff. Like, when a person goes to their deathbed, they don't worry about the stuff that they wish they would have purchased. It's the stuff they wish they would have done.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a life podcast. It's a story podcast. It's a bit of an open journal dive into people's lives as I sit and uncover the real story behind my guest's journey up to this point, finding out what makes them them, and sharing the parts of their story that we otherwise wouldn't get to hear. Now, who am I? I am your host. My name is Ross Tyson. I am a creative director, a freelancer of all kinds, but of course, in this case, most importantly, I'm a podcaster, and I just love to talk to people a whole lot. And I have a real deep dive episode for you this week, and a rad guest with a bit of a wild story. But before we do that, I of course need to first remind you that this podcast is brought to you in part by Promo West Productions. Because yeah, that's right, I've got some sponsors around here helping me keep the lights on, and right now, I've got some awesome shows to share with you that are coming your way via Promo West because, we're getting into the warmer months, and barring any random Ohio snowstorms that can certainly possibly pop out of nowhere at any point in time, it's time to get out there and enjoy some flippin' gigs. So if you're interested in catching a live show, you can check out one of the following that are going down at Kemba Live via Promo West Productions. So on Saturday, May 28th, the world is a vampire because the Smashing Pumpkins are coming to town and playing Kemba Live. Again, that's May 28th. Then you've got Flume on Saturday, June 4th, Lord Huron on June 14th, and then Flogging Molly and the Interrupters on Saturday, June 25th. Honestly, truthfully, if you've never seen Flogging Molly live, I highly recommend checking them out. I remember seeing them at my very first Warped Tour that I ever went to. I caught their set live, and they are incredibly fun. So highly recommend. So once again, Saturday, May 28th, Smashing Pumpkins, Flume on Saturday, June 4th, Lord Huron on June 14th, and Flogging Molly and the Interrupters on Saturday, June 25th. So to purchase tickets, you can visit axs.com. or for more info on these shows, or of course any others, because yeah, there's a lot going down, you can visit promowestlive.com. So for tickets, axs.com, or for more info in general, promowestlive.com. So let's get into this week's conversation. It is with my friend Unnus Latif. He's a music producer and an engineer based right here in Columbus at Black Moon Recordings, a company that he owns and operates. Now, we had been internet friends for quite some time, so this is one of those classic What You Don't Hear episodes where the guest and I sort of knew each other via the internet, and then had like a quick little coffee sit down where we got to know each other a little bit, but then finally sat down for the show and made a full conversation happen. And we really uncover his story here. He does a lot more than just audio engineering, and we dig into all of that. And truthfully, just at the start here, I will thank Unnus for being as open and honest as he is in this episode, because he shares a lot of what he's been through to get to where he is. He's very vulnerable in this. He's very honest about family troubles that he's went through and just a lot of stuff. But you know what? I'll let him share all of that with you. So let's just get to it. This is episode 57 of What You Don't Hear.
Stuff like this could be vulnerable too, because you're putting yourself out there, you're immortalizing yourself, and when you do stuff like that, like, people start to get in their own heads about it. That's a constant battle. I know in the audio world it is, but I can imagine it's the same thing in video and stuff too.
And that's always my worry, is like, I would love to have just people who are running the cameras and
exactly
actively checking the audio and all this sort of stuff, and I can just sit and talk to somebody, but it's adding an extra body in the room, it's adding more ears, and does that make somebody else a little bit more uncomfortable of like, oh no, it's just Ross and I talking, cool, like I'm in the flow of the conversation? Are they like, what was that person doing over there? Like, why are they staring at me?
Everybody's worried about being judged, when in the grand scheme of things, like, in the world, it doesn't matter.
No, it's hard to get past that, honestly.
I mean, our whole lives we're seeking validation for stuff. I mean, that's what it really is. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's really heavy to say that out loud, but
right.
But at the end of the day, it's like, whose validation do you need but your own, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a tough reminder too,
really
because
is.
like, I feel like there's just different levels of what you can accept with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's some people who, they're like, oh, I don't give a F, I do whatever, who cares? And it's like, there's still going to be something that you're going to be worried about. And then there's like different levels of that where it's like, you're going to be way too concerned about it, or somewhere in the middle where it's like, all right, some things I'm too concerned about and I shouldn't be, but other things I just don't care. Like, I'm guilty of that with this show where like, I mean, dude, these things are like anywhere from like an hour to 2 hours.
Right.
And I can't remember if you and I have talked about this before, but like when I'm editing the episodes and like I say a word wrong or I slip up or something, and it's like an hour 22 in.
Right.
I'm like, someone's gonna hear that I slipped up. I sound like an idiot. And it's like, dude, no one's paying that much attention.
Right.
You know what I mean? To be almost an hour and a half through an episode, no one's gonna be like, I can't believe Ross forgot that word at that specific time, stamp right in the middle of the episode. What an idiot! Like, but that's how I think.
Well,
I'm just like, someone's gonna notice it.
I remember when we were talking about it. Like, that's kind of what I like about it. It's like, it's authentic. You know, it's like when I did my other interview with the BBC. It's like, how do you sum your whole life story into 15 minutes?
Yeah, man. When you told me that, I was like, what? I mean, still cool.
Yeah,
a cool thing to do.
It's awesome.
But I couldn't imagine just like, hey, you've got a literal like 15 minutes or whatever.
15 minutes to tell us everything from like everything that got you to where you are now. And it's like, okay, I'm 24. How do I sum up 24 years worth of BS into 15 minute and make it family friendly and all this other stuff? And it's just like, well, that's the exciting thing. I'm glad that you were down to do this because there's no real guidelines. Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I haven't said it yet, but I appreciate you having me out.
Yeah, dude. So. I'm stoked that you wanted to do it because I feel like a couple months ago we officially met up. We grabbed some coffee. We chatted a little bit. And we pretty much made the plan of like, dude, I'll just have you on the podcast at some point. Now, not to just dive off the deep end immediately, but even mentioning like the BBC podcast that you were on. Yeah. And you were kind of explaining like, I had to just kind of cram everything in 15 minutes. Like, I feel like there's so much more to your story that I've seen bits and pieces of like online and even heard bits and pieces of in our like coffee meeting. Yeah. But I'm excited to dive into all of that stuff here. Yeah, and I hope that you're stoked to at least like have the space to do that.
Well, that's what I love because like now I can be like, if somebody's like, well, what got you to where I'm at? I'm gonna be like, check out Ross's podcast.
Yeah, like, no, that's perfect.
If you have like an hour and a half to spend to listen to me blab on about what got me to where I'm at, do that. Let's save me spending your studio time, talking about myself.
Yes. I love that this show is because so many people who have been on have told me those things where they're like, somebody asked about like, this part of my life or asked me about this. And I literally just pointed them to the episode of the podcast that I was on because it's just like, it's an all encompassing, like, you want a full story that I can't sit for an hour and a half of your studio time and tell you, like, here you go. But yeah, dude, I'm stoked to make this happen because even though we've chatted a little bit, we've been online friends for a minute. Yeah. We got coffee, we chatted a little bit. I still feel like I don't really know much about you. I know that you're an audio engineer, producer. I know you work with a lot of bands and all that sort of stuff. But I for sure don't know the story there. But I know bits and pieces that intrigue me. Yeah. That I want to kind of dive into.
I'm down.
So even, I guess just kicking it off, like maybe for anybody who is being introduced to you for the first time, what all do you do?
That's a great question.
Probably a loaded answer.
It's a very loaded question. Yeah. Just like I remember you telling me that you classify yourself as a creative director.
Yes, that is a label I found out that works for me.
I don't know what works for me. That's the main thing. Because I do so many things and I wear so many hats. I'll consider myself an audio engineer first because that's where I kind of stuck myself, but I don't want to put myself in that box. Because a lot of times I'll get hit up and somebody will be like, hey, can you shoot a drum video for me? Or, hey, my band doesn't quite have the budget for a music video, but we just want to do like a studio thing. Can we do that with you? And I'll be like, Sure, I've dabbled in video a little bit. Let me do that. Or there was one time a few months ago where somebody was like, "Hey, can you take photos of me at this show?" And I'm like, "I've never done photography before, but fuck it, I'll do it. Like, let's do it."
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know. I'll just consider myself creative, but if I had to put a label on it, probably an audio engineer first, because that's where I live most of the time, is in the studio.
Right, and that's one thing that like I feel like is so interesting about you is that I do see you post all these different things. Yeah. You're posting like, hey, I did a drum video, or hey, here's like a little photo set that I did, or hey, we're building things in the studio. Like I do feel like you have your hand in so many things, and that is also the difficult part of being such a creative person is it is hard to label. Really, you're like, here's the lead thing that I do. You know, here's the main like bill paying thing, or here, and not even in a negative way, bill paying, just like, hey, here's the thing I found the most success in, or whatever. But it branches out into so many different things. So I guess my next question is, where does that all come from? And I know I'm now opening the floodgates of the entire story, but like, it's always so interesting to me to find out. I mean, like, what makes somebody, and I'm asking you in this standpoint, like, I'm always interested to find out, like, what makes somebody not just be like, I want this job and I want to do this thing and this is my career and this is my life path.
Right.
And that's it. So I'm always interested to kind of dive in and pick those things apart. Like, what made you so interested in wanting to do all these sort of things?
Well, I remember we had a conversation about like what led us to where we're at, and for you it was, I think I remember you telling me where it was just like you would do one thing, but then you would be like, it's this specific thing within the specific thing that I find most joy in. So for me, like the audio engineering thing was just like, I don't know. Everybody when they're a kid, they want to be a rock star, and they want to be like important and like big and this whole thing. And I remember trying to dive down that rabbit hole of wanting to do the music thing and be in a band and like go on tour and do the whole thing. But I would find my most enjoyment from actually like recording the music. A lot of the stuff that I've done over the years just kind of stems from that. Like I guess if we were to go down that rabbit hole, about 10 years ago now, I'm in my 9th year of doing this audio engineering thing professionally. 10 years ago, I remember like kind of dabbling in like actual recording music, because before that, you know, from the time I was 10, I used to just like make beats in like FL Studio, and I would always like get like the trial version and then like either change to like my dad's computer or like wipe it and then like start over it, because I mean I was a little bit of a nerd growing up, even till this day. Like I'm really into technology and stuff. I mean my day job is in the tech field, so that's just something that I found that I do naturally. So music kind of went hand in hand with that, making the beats and doing the whole thing. I kind of rediscovered my love for rock music, and subsequently metalcore, the whole thing. This was like at the peak, you know, early 2010s metalcore scene. That became a thing. And right at that time, I started getting into like mixing stuff. So I would always have friends over, and like I would tell my parents, we're gonna dive into this a little bit more down the road, but I would tell my parents that these are school projects. And then I would have friends come over and we would like bang out covers of stuff, and I would have like the crappiest setup. I would have like a USB mic, and keep in mind this is early 2010, so we don't have the nice USB mics we have now and nice interfaces and all that stuff. I had like this, it was literally called a Bad Axe mic. Bad AAX.
Okay.
And I would like lay it on a pillow in front of a Spider 4 amp, and then just like I remember the first cover we did was of Misery Business.
Love it.
And I remember working on that, but then like I think that's when the switch kind of flicked in my mind, where I was just like, I found myself enjoying more the process of like EQing it and like making it sound better than I actually enjoyed the song itself.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think I still have the file on my computer somewhere, but it sounded like dog shit.
It's like, send me that file and I'll edit it into the episode.
Let's not say we did. But I remember my guitar player at the time, we're still friends. He's actually an animator now. I sent him a mix, and I had like put MIDI bass on it, and like I ran it through a guitar, and I did something weird with it, and I sent it to him, and he's like, "Dude, you made this sound really good." In hindsight, it really wasn't really good, but then I was just like, maybe I have something here. Maybe this could be a thing. But then I discovered Ultimate Metal. There's a forum. A lot of my friends are from that forum, where a lot of people would share multi-tracks. Like they would record themselves, and because I didn't have the gear to record myself or like record like full-on bands and stuff, people would share their files on that forum. I would download them and then work on them and try to see if I can make these things sound good. And then eventually I just kept getting obsessive, like to the point that when I'm at school, all that's on my mind, because I'm still at high school at this point, all that's on my mind is like, I'm going to go home, I'm going to work on that mix. Or I'll like, if anybody's listening to this from high school, for one, I'm sorry. But also, I remember like bugging the hell out of my friends. Like, I used to mix, like my signature thing, which really isn't a signature thing, was I used to mix on Skull Candy earbuds. And I would always be the kid that's walking around with Skull Candy earbuds in school, and I'd like hand an earbud to a friend, and I'd be like, "Dude, listen to this mix." And I was that guy.
Incredible.
And these mixes were horrible, but I thought they were so cool. And I was just like, I discovered what a compressor is, and like, this is sick. I can make things louder, but like squash the peaks and like make things more level. And do the whole thing, and then like I discovered EQing things, and I could be like, okay, now I can make this, kick drum sound like a fucking like a typewriter now, like make this thing really cut through the mix, man. But that's just kind of where that stemmed, and then eventually it led to me bombarding small labels with my demo mixes. And eventually one hit me back up, and they're like, hey, and this was when I was starting to get into like writing my own music. They said, hey, the song kind of sucks, but there might be something here as far as you mixing goes. How about we send you some projects that you can do test mixes on? And if we like what we hear, then maybe we can bring you on and actually make you one of our go-to people. So that one thing led to another. So like literally a year into me learning how to mix, I get picked up by this small label in New York, and I'm like 16 at the time, 15 going on 16 at the time, and I basically just hopped full first right into mixing for a label. Needless to say, those aren't mixes I enjoy now. They're not on my portfolio, but you know, like a lot of people, their audio engineering career starts with them being like, okay, I was in a band, we recorded our own demos, then I started to enjoy the thing more. I started recording other bands, then that, you know, the whole spread by word of mouth thing becomes a thing, and then then it sprouts from there, and then eventually they get to a point that they can hire an assistant and hire like, you know, second, third person, and they do the tracking, and you have somebody that does editing, and then you just graduate to the mixing and mastering thing. In my case, I started mixing and mastering.
Yeah.
But the side note to all this stuff is I'm having to do all this in private.
Yeah, so this is the like the tiny bits that I've heard and gathered from your story that we've never really dove into.
Yeah.
So what do you mean when you say that you were having to do it in private?
So while I'm doing all this stuff, telling my parents that I'm doing school projects, staying after school to work on school projects, basically just mixing on friends' laptops and recording stuff with them, or going over to a friend's house. I remember there was one guy in like the neighborhood behind me that I used to hang out with, and we would go to his house, and he had a small recording setup. This was basically like my parents thought I was out probably doing drugs or whatever, but in reality I was working on music. And the problem there was that my parents weren't all about it. They weren't very supportive of it. So I'm having to do all this stuff, work for this label, mix on earbuds. And the reason that was my signature thing was because my parents forbade it. In their ideology, their specific ideology, They think that music is not allowed. And because of that, it kind of poses a paradox, I would say, where this is something that I've grown super passionate for, but if my parents found out, like, that we would have a huge issue.
Yeah. So I guess even when, like, obviously you start hiding the mixing and all that sort of stuff, but like even before that, like how did you even get introduced to the idea of I want to be in this music world in general? Like based off of that, like the hey, everybody wants to be a rock star sort of thing. Like,
I don't know. It's just like there's a lot of like there's a lot more to like my childhood and stuff that's like a whole another can of worms. But I don't know. Maybe like goes back to my like prior to us hopping on here. I remember I talked about like people wanting to be validated, and I think that's where it initially stemmed. Where everybody wants to be validated or feel important or something like that. I realized that like I don't want the world's eyes on me. I don't want to be the guy that's like that like finds fame and then burns out and then fades away. I wanted to be the guy that like feels important by means of serving people. So helping people create music became this kind of thing where it was just like, okay, I might not be the best musician. I might be in a position where like my parents forbade me from doing music, period. So I wasn't able to take lessons. Like all the instruments I know, I'm self-taught on. I mean, the reason I've been posting all those drum videos is because that was my quarantine project. It was when COVID first happened, I had just bought my studio. So I had this drum kit. I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn it. So I'm self-taught on everything.
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You just learned drums?
Yeah, within
stuff?
the last 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that.
Thank you so much.
Watching I would have been like, oh, he's been at this for years.
No.
That's
not
wild.
at all.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're
that's
good, totally.
Wild.
But yeah, it was just one of those things where I was just like, okay, there's always going to be somebody better than me at this music thing, and music is a whole another can of worms. I usually tell people that the recording is the fun part. After that, that's the work, because you have to reach out to promoters, get booked on shows, get put on tour, and then there's so much noise in the saturated music scene, and it gets more and more saturated as time goes on, that it's really hard to go through try to get yourself through that noise. But with that, I just found myself that like, okay, I think I have a knack for this recording thing, and I started to enjoy the process of discovering new sounds and discovering ways to make things sound better, that it just became, okay, I might not be the best musician in the world, but I know how to make mixes sound semi-decent to where people would want to pay me for them. Why not make this a thing?
Was that like the natural progression? Like it literally just started as like an interest, a passion, and then at some point you were like, oh, I can turn this into a job or a career or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
well, because it was one of those things where like, I remember at one point before my parents like caught on to the fact that I was doing this and like they were gonna forbid it. I remember showing my mom like just a little like acoustic thing that I recorded, and she's like, "That's really good." And that was the one time that she had validated that something that I had an interest in, she liked. And I think I've clung on to that for the last 10 years, and I've just kept going with it. Even though, further down, we'll get into that, eventually they told me to stop. But at that point, she told me that, like, hey, this is something you're pretty good at. I wasn't doing good in school. There's that saying that gifted kids turn into burnouts, turn into has-beens. I was that gifted kid very early on in school because, from my background, all it's about is, you start out, you get the good grades, your parents get mad at you if you get B's, and then eventually you get an arranged marriage, you become a doctor, and then you have kids, and then so on and so forth. That just didn't seem that interesting to me, to be honest, and the music thing just like became my own identity, kind of.
Right.
Being a first generation Pakistani American kid, growing up in this environment where I didn't really grow up with anybody that looked like me or acted like me or had the same background as me, music was the only thing where I was just like, nobody judged me for being myself. I mean, this label picked me up as like a 15-year-old kid with, just, it was very non-discriminatory. It was just like, it was this thing where they just liked me for what I did, not who I was. No, growing up in a post 9/11 America, it's hard. I mean, I lived in New York for a brief stint of time from 3rd grade to 6th grade, and that was really tough because I didn't have anybody else that looked at me, and being in this post 9/11 America, people just judged me for my cultural background. I mean, I grew up Muslim. I'm not super spiritual now, but being that kid, I was always looked at, okay, like I'm chubby as a kid, and I'm a Muslim, and I'm the only one in my class that looks like that. So whenever 9/11 rolls around, I was always the kid that got bullied for it. And seeing my parents lose their jobs due to like my dad lost his job after 9/11. He kind of got back on his feet, but then the recession happened around the time we moved to New York. So it was just like this whole thing where it was just a bad time. So growing past that into my preteens, getting into music, my gateway into music, this was just one of those things where people didn't care about all of that. They just looked at you for what you could create, what was inside of you, what was in your brain that you were able to make into something that you can listen to and immortalize it into something. That's just kind of where that leads to,
So, rewinding a little bit, like, did you move around a lot?
Yeah, I did.
When you were growing up, or
my dad? I don't know too much about his career prior to it, but my dad worked in telecommunications. He worked for Comcast when I was a kid, and he owned subcontracting companies. So they would have people that would whenever you have somebody come out to install your cable and stuff like that, usually if it's not directly through the service provider, they might send a contractor out. He owned the companies that delegated those people out. So because of that, and because we were in this new age of internet, where internet's going everywhere, the infrastructure just didn't exist. I mean, we had dial-up, we had like Net Zero and America Online, but like broadband was starting to become a thing. So I guess we were positioned in this perfect storm of where the demand was there, the money was there, people need internet, people need high-speed internet. So my dad would travel a ton to assist in these projects where they're putting up all these fiber optic lines and all. I guess at that point it was all copper, but all these lines in all these states to get high-speed internet to basically every household in America. So along the East Coast, that's what my dad did. He would, when we lived in Maryland, he would handle the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, subsequently New York. So I was born in Maryland, moved from there to New York. That was when my dad lost his job, so he bought a store in New York, which was kind of a good call because dollar stores were probably the most profitable business during that time. That didn't work out, so then he kind of went back to his roots of doing the telecommunications thing. We moved back to Maryland, then moved to Michigan, and somehow ended up here. So a lot of moving around as a kid, because in that line of work, there's usually big projects, and when those projects dry up, then you have to go find a new place that has work.
Right. And sorry if you said this earlier, like around what age was it when you started to discover like music and you were like, okay, this is like not so much even start recording, but more so even like the discovery part of it?
I think that's like a two-parter. I would say like I always listened to just whatever my parents would listen to. They were really progressive when I was super young. Like, my mom wasn't super into like the traditional garb and doing the whole thing. She used to be pretty progressive, jeans, t-shirt kind of gal. I don't know if 9/11 changed that or what changed that for them, and then they became the way they are now. But I used to just listen to whatever they listened to. And with moving around and stuff, I don't know, I never really paid attention to music super early on. But because I moved around a ton, you have to make new friends. You have to interact with the kids around you because kids are brutal, man. Like,
I would be terrified of children right now, like, because they would just say something about me, like,
exactly.
I'd be like, oh no.
So like moving around so much, I remember when I first moved to New York, one of my neighbor friends, we became really good friends, and he would show me, like, we would hop in his mom's car, and he would get his mom's keys, and he would switch to accessory mode, and he would pop in CDs. And that was when I really got introduced to, like, my own individuality and music taste. So super early on, it was hip-hop. So I got really into hip-hop and rap early on. That was, like, when I was able to discover my own music taste. Not just whatever my parents listened to, not just nursery rhymes or whatever. It was just my own taste in music. And then, like everybody, eventually they start paying attention to the soundtracks in their video games. So I remember, it was probably like 8 or 9 at this point. Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition.
Nice.
I know it's very specific, but that's why it's important to me. It's because I can still remember this. I had a PSP. I was a nerd kid, so I used to be able to, like, I remember being this young and being able to hack my PSP. Government, please don't come after me. But this early on, I was able to hack my PSP, get custom firmware on it, and download games, like pirated games, and put them on there. That's just the type of kid I was. Because I grew up in this household where everything's technology, we were one of the first households to have internet and stuff like that. My dad, he would train his employees in the house on, like, how to put PCI cards in a computer and stuff. So I would just watch my dad do stuff with computers.
Wow.
And then I learned how to do that stuff myself, like how to format a hard drive, how to install, at this point, Windows XP on a computer. I had my first computer at the age of 3. So, like, you know, I used to play video games and stuff like that. But going back to this PSP thing, Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition, because my neighbor friend had me hooked on hip-hop, you can pick what genre of music you want to listen to in that game. So I would just have it on the hip-hop mode, like hip-hop rap mode. Great. My mom, through the mosque, would, like, introduce me to other kids, and, like, we would have, like, play dates or whatever. One of which, this kid was, I think I'm still friends with him, like, on Facebook or something today. But eventually we got put, like, together, and we were playing the same game. We both had Midnight Club 3. We were playing it at a Hawk, where PSPs, you can link them together wirelessly and, like, race each other. But I was listening to my hip-hop playlist or whatever that was in there. He's like, dude, you should try the rock playlist. I was like, nah, man. He's like, dude, you gotta try the rock playlist. So I switched it to the rock, and it was, the first thing I heard was 3 Days Grace, and it was the song Pain. And that rocked my fucking world.
I love that.
And I was like, dude, I think I like rock now.
Yeah.
So I just remember, like, there's a lot of 3 Days Grace on that song. Another staple of that song was, or another staple of that video game was, what was it? 3 Days Grace was huge in there. Jimmy Eat World was in there too.
Okay.
So it's just like that type of music. A lot of people, their pop punk starts with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. For me, it was Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition.
Right. That's it. That was Tony Hawk was my introduction most of the time.
And then I remember, like, because I was super into racing games. I wasn't really into Tony Hawk. So, and then I also remember Need for Speed. I forget which game it was, but it was one of the Need for Speed games. This was like a year later. That's what led me to this genre. Was the 3 songs I took away from that were Bullet for My Valentine, Hand of Blood, and Disturbed Decadence.
Incredible.
Like, and then I was like, dude, I like heavy metal.
Yeah.
I think I like this heavier music. And I remember at one point, this was right before I moved back to Maryland, I remember finding a pair of black jeans in my closet. And I usually was like a blue jeans kind of kid. And because kids are brutal, I was like, I'm going to try these jeans on for one day and see what happens. I went to school and this kid called me an emo kid, and that's been my identity ever since.
That was it. That was just it.
And then I started hanging out with said emo kids, and then I was introduced to like Paramore and Evanescence and stuff like that. And then I moved. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm in this new place, and now my entire identity is just emo. And then I got into Escape the Fate and Bless the Fall and all these other like Warped Tour bands that were popping off at that time.
Tiptoe into like the scene. So every time you moved around, like I know you've already explained like, music at one point in time, it started to become your identity. You at least had that kind of like safe connection where it's like, oh, here's the other emo kids, here's the other hip hop kids, whatever it is. But like, do you remember at all like what it felt like moving around and like having to almost reset in each town, or were you just so young that it was like, this is just it? Like
for me, it was every time it was pretty devastating, because a lot of people forget what it's like to be a kid. And when you're a kid, your identity is like the stuff you do in your free time and your friends. So when you finally make friends, especially like if you're in that situation where I am, where it's like it's really hard to make friends because you're kind of not really set up for that kind of thing. I was also, because I moved around so much, I became kind of reserved as a kid. It was hard for me to talk to people. Even now, like up until the last few years, I had a hard time starting a conversation with anybody. Like even now, like if I was in a bar, I couldn't just walk up to somebody and just say hi and just like start a conversation. So when you're having to be like, when your mom tells you like, hey, we're moving, you're like, fuck, now I gotta make new friends. Mm-hmm. Now I have to like understand the dynamics of what it's like to introduce yourself to people, and like you can't grow with these people because like Brian, he does recording out of my place, he's my best friend. He'll tell me stories about like people that he's grown up with, and I'm like, man, I wish. I'm not gonna lie, I envy him at times because it's like, man, I don't remember anybody from my early childhood. I remember people from like 5th grade onwards. But as far as early childhood goes, it was hard to make friends. There was one point where we moved within Maryland a few times prior to moving to New York. I remember 3rd grade. I remember 3rd grade happening. I don't remember talking to anybody. I remember a kid stole my bike once, but I don't remember making any friends. And because when you move so much, then you forget, like, you never really learn how to socialize. You never really understand like social etiquette and stuff, because there's those videos on YouTube where people they'll do like slang in different parts of the country and how people like interact with each other differently. You not only do you have to learn how to interact with people while you're a developing kid, you're also having to navigate the complexities of what different subcultures of America are like, especially moving along the East Coast. Because like Maryland, Baltimore area, or like, I didn't grow up in Baltimore, but like let's just take Baltimore as an example versus, let's say, Staten Island. Way different. Or Detroit. Way different.
Yeah.
That's a tough transition for an adult, let alone me moving from like New York to like Tennessee as an adult, like just like it's tough.
Right.
So it was pretty devastating. I remember being optimistic at one point though, because when we moved from New York back to Maryland, we only lived there for a year prior to moving to Michigan. And I remember my dad telling me like, this is where things turn around. Things are going to be better from here on out. We're going to buy a house. Like we were living in rentals up until this point. We're going to buy a house. You're going to have your own room. It's going to be great. So I was actually pretty stoked for this one move. And I'm 12 at this point. It sucks that I'm moving. It sucks that I'm moving away from these friends that I've made over the year that I've lived there. But I mean, I guess I don't really have any roots in that place that I lived. But I'm like, okay, I'm a preteen now. I'm going into my teenage years. I kind of have a grasp on who I am, at least subculturally. We're going to get a fresh start. We're going to try to turn this around. It's going to be great. Go to Michigan, and it was the worst few years of my life. So
really?
Yeah, because that's where all the music stuff starts to hit the fan. Because up until this point, because I was a tech nerd and I was, learning my music tastes and stuff, when I was super into the hip hop stuff, I would just be like, okay, well, I'm I want to try making hip hop. I'm kind of bored of video games. I'm gonna like, this is also around the time I discovered that YouTube was a thing. This is very early YouTube, press the HQ button to make it high quality YouTube. This is 4:3 aspect ratio YouTube we're talking about. There were like, people would upload videos of them like lip syncing to songs or like doing that stuff. I was like, man, it'd be really cool to like make a song. There's a lot of other aspects to this, but yeah, that's my earliest memory was that 10 years old downloading FL Studio and putting like a 4 on the floor beat into like the MIDI punch thing for the drum designer that's within it. And I was like, I'm a producer now. But then, going to Michigan, I was like, okay, I kind of have a little bit of grasp of this music thing. Even prior to moving to Michigan, like we had a music class. I think I mentioned this in a different podcast, the BBC one. Like I said, I don't know. They cut everything down to 15 minutes. So I don't know if it's out there,
right.
But I remember mentioning this before. We had this music class, and they put us in the music lab, the computer lab, and this was my first experience with a Mac. Well, my first experience with like a modern Mac with iLife, and it had GarageBand on it. And the teacher was just like, okay, hit the little curly button. Those are your loops. Drag it into a composition, and at the end of the day, we're just gonna go around the room, and then we'll see what everybody's made. And because this is me discovering my rock identity, I obviously go to all the guitar and drum loops and bass guitar loops and stuff like that. GarageBand had some pretty good loops. I wouldn't use them now, but there's some good stuff in there. I remember going around the room, and everybody just had like these, no offense, but like absolutely terrible compositions.
Right. Yeah.
Because not being a musician is not for everybody. And I remember I got the highest score in that class because the composition I had actually sounded like a song.
Yeah.
So, because I had that prior experience with messing around in FL Studio, when I was put in front of a DAW where things were actually a lot easier for me because I'm not having to like punch in notes or like make a chord. I'm just taking loops and dragging them together. All I have to think about is the creative process, not making things sound good at this point. That was where it was a little bit more validating to me that like, okay, like I do have a knack for this. This is prior to showing my mom the recording. Then we moved to Michigan. Have to make new friends again. This is, 7th, 8th grade at this point. 7th and 8th grade, spent out of middle school. All the most of the kids that I made friends with, they went to a different high school that I went to. I ended up going to this other high school, and that was it was kind of refreshing for me. Knowing, usually it was devastating to move from one place to another, having to make friends. For me, it was kind of refreshing at this point because it was like, okay, now I've kind of figured out what the culture in this state is like. Now I know how people are in the Midwest because this is the first time I've moved to the Midwest. People here are weird. They say "ope" and stuff a lot. Yeah. This is weird. There's no beaches. What's going on with that? So I'm like, okay, now I'm kind of prepped to go into high school. Immediately made friends with this kid that likes Slipknot. Perfect. I remember trading him my Skull Candy, or I didn't have Skull Candies at this point. I had like Apple earbuds. And I remember trading him for like some in-ear headphones. I think they were Skull Candies. And then I was like, what are you listening to? And he showed me People Equal Shit by Slipknot. I love how the only things I can remember are specific song names in video games at this point. But I made friends with him, and he introduced me to his friend group. And at this point, I'm super into like the heavy metal stuff. I was one of those kids where it was like, dude, if the breakdowns aren't brutal, man, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. Like, pop music is trash. I wish I was
like, what are these clean vocals? Ugh.
It needs to be totes brutes, dude.
Yes. So, I guess when does, you're figuring out these new friends groups.
Yeah.
You're finding, again, another layer of new music. But you said it was Detroit, right?
It was Farmington, technically. It's like 20, 30 minutes outside of Detroit.
Okay.
Everybody that says they're from Detroit, they're not from Detroit. They're from a suburb.
Right,
Like,
yes. That's the classic case. So I guess, like, when does, like, family dynamic change in all this?
I think it was all the moving that really did it for them. But going into my teenage years in a completely new environment and kind of on the verge of the rebellious teen phase, I think it was just the perfect storm. I'm at this point where I'm just like more worried about making friends than I'm getting good grades. So I was doing pretty bad in school and I was struggling to try to fit in, especially because a lot of these people grew up together. And like I'm just like this random brown emo kid that just popped out of nowhere. So I'm having to try to fit in, and to be quite honest, at that time, I'm sure it's different now. Emo kids were not very welcoming. Right. They're very much, like I said, I don't know if it's the case now, but they were not open to minorities being in their group. So it was kind of tough. So I tried to make friends with everybody. Thankfully, I was able to at least get along with most people. But going back to the family dynamic thing, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place.
You're
I'm
good.
like ADHD
No, this is the place for it. If there's ever a place, this can house all the rambles and all the trail offs and all the things.
Yeah. So going back to the family dynamic thing. I think I started I'm trying to remember. A lot of this stuff is kind of a blur. That's why we have therapy. So we got into the thing. What was it? And this is when I started getting into the mixes. I remember convincing my mom to let me buy that USB mic. What was it? Oh, it was... I had an acoustic guitar, and it was a decor piece. I never learned to play it. It was just sitting like in the corner of my room. One of my friends, I told my friend, I was like, I always wanted to learn how to play guitar, but my mom won't let me take lessons, because like the extent to my musical abilities at this point was like 3rd, 4th grade. I played clarinet in band, and then my mom took me out of it. So that was my extent of like musical experience. One of my friends told me to learn Brain Stew by Green Day on guitar. He's like, dude, it's easy. You just, I think it was drop D, you just bar it, just play it out that way.
It's like the same chords over and over.
Yeah, right? Same chords over and over. Learned that, and I was like, okay, this is cool. I was like, now, I wish I had an electric guitar. I was like, that would be so cool to have an electric guitar. I convinced my mom, and this is with money I had saved up, I convinced my mom to let me get Rocksmith. And it came with an electric guitar as a controller. This was like the super early version of Rocksmith. And she's like, what's this guitar that comes with it? I'm like, Mom, it's a game controller.
Okay.
It's fine. It's going to be fine. She's like, this better just be a game controller. And I'm like, it's fine. So I got that. I'm not really learning really, really fast or really well. I still can't play guitar that well now, even all these years later. I never actually learned my chord shapes or anything. But that, alongside me learning how to mix and doing the whole thing on the Ultimate Metal Forum, I figured out that you can use the Rocksmith adapter that you plug into your Xbox as a USB on one end, 1/4 inch on the other. If you plug it into your computer, it shows up as an audio interface, and you can plug your guitar straight into your computer and record it. And this was when my friend introduced me to Cubase. And Cubase was like my first real DAW that I could record in, and that's when I started doing the Ultimate Metal thing. That's where I started to pick up on recording, doing the shitty Misery Business cover, doing all that stuff. Doing all this stuff, my dad wasn't really around all the time because he was always working. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was always like, what are you doing? Like, she's like, is this really for school projects? I'm like, yeah, totally. Everything's fine. It was so bad my school grades were so bad at this point. I legit taught myself Photoshop so I could Photoshop my transcripts and show them to my parents. It was that bad.
Wow.
But as you could tell, I kind of had a knack for teaching myself how to do really weird shit. So like hacking PSPs to get free games because the recession was a thing and we couldn't go buy video games.
Yeah.
Photoshopping my grades so my parents didn't know. Learning how to audio engineer on headphones. Like that, and all these things are just going on. But nowhere within this are my parents like, hey, that's kind of cool. I'm proud of you. You know, it's like my parents are just like, oh, he's just a kid being a kid. You know, so it's just, I'm doing all this stuff. My friends are freaking the fuck out. They're like, dude, how'd you get all these games? And I'm like, I don't know. My dad got me this 2 gigabyte memory stick for my PSP, and I just put all these games on here. And like, there's this thing. So you can do all that stuff. Basically, teaching myself all these skills, playing video games, doing that whole thing. The music was just kind of one of those side quests that I had as a kid. You know, I was always either tinkering with something. This is also around the time I was starting to get into video. Like my dad had bought like this crappy little flip. It was a flip camera. I don't know if you remember those. They had like the little thing comes out, USB stick, plug into your computer. I would make YouTube videos with my friends. Music just became one of those side things at this point. I took it kind of seriously, kind of not, very early on. But it was just one of those activities. But then my friends would start asking for favors. They'd be like, hey, I actually have this like project I need voiceover for. I remember, I still have the recording actually. My friend was doing this animation and he needed to do voiceover. So I had him come over. We used the USB mic. I set up an aggregate device. You can still do this in Mac OS now. But you set up an aggregate device so you can hook up 2 USB devices and have them show up as an audio interface. So I had my USB Bad Axe microphone and a Rock Band microphone. So they had like this whole dialogue, and that was like my first like paid recording session.
Nice. Okay.
Was just like this voiceover thing. But then my parents eventually they were just like, you're doing too much on the computer. Like there's like I didn't know what memory management really was on a hard drive at this point. I didn't realize how big audio sessions can get. But like my dad's unable to use the computer at this point because like the 500 gigabyte hard drive that's on that thing, which was massive. Like we would never fill that thing up, was starting to get full.
Yeah.
My computer that I had in my room had a 20 gigabyte hard drive. That thing was just gone, like is full. They're just like, you're paying too much attention to this stuff. Like, what's going on? I'm like, nah, it's just a hobby, whatever. But then they eventually found out, like the house of cards started to fall. They eventually found out about my grades, and they eventually found out about like the music thing. And they're like, we got to put a stop to this. And I'm like, all right, whatever. We'll put a stop, and we'll stop. And then that's when I would use like my dad's laptop that he never used. That's when I would start hiding the stuff. So they were just like, this is forbidden. Like, it's not allowed in our religion. You can't be doing this stuff. But at this point, it's become an addiction. Like, my parents weren't telling me that they were proud of me for my grades because I was a fuck up of a student. They didn't like any of these side endeavors I did. They treated me like a kid. A lot of parents, a lot of successful parents that I've seen, the respect goes both ways. Where it's like, you treat your kid like a normal human being, and then eventually they grow up to be functional members of society. In my case, I was always talked down to as a kid because in my culture, that's just how it goes. You live, your whole purpose on this planet is to serve your parents, basically. Even when you grow up and get married and have kids, your parents live with you. Like that's just how the culture is. And me being a product of my environment, growing up in America, that's not how it goes here. Usually it's here, your parents want you out by the time you're 18, you go to college, you go do whatever, and then eventually you sustain yourself, and your parents are proud to see you succeed and thrive and get out of the nest and do your own thing. Not the case. So I was starting to feed off of the validation, going back to that conversation, of my friends being like, yo, this is sick. Like, I'm really excited about these things. And that's what led me to being like, okay, I don't want to be in a band. I don't want to be famous. I just want to help people create their art because it makes them happy, and because it makes them happy, it makes me happy. So since I wasn't really getting that from my parents, where they were proud of the stuff that I was creating, it became that conversation of, now I just got to hide this. And then eventually it became, now I have to hide this because now there's a label that needs work done. And a lot of other stuff happened before we moved away from Michigan. Namely, I got into drugs as a teenager. That was a bad thing that I kind of tried to use as an alternative to music. Sometimes those things mix and then get way worse. I got into trouble with the police a lot because I would sneak out. I would hang out with people that I shouldn't be hanging out with. That is just a really rough part. That's still something I'm working through in therapy, actually. But that's why a lot of this is a blur. A lot of it's, my brain cells are fucked up now, basically. But eventually my parents like found out. This is actually something I remembered recently. My parents found out. They basically like forbade me from doing everything. I remember this still in Michigan? Yes, this was still in Michigan. I remember like getting in so much trouble with the law at this point that like there were several times where I've had to be like detained in the police station till like 4 a.m. There was one point there was an Amber Alert put out for me because I had got in a car with a friend of mine. Well, it was a girl I was seeing at the time. We had drove like almost an hour away, and then an Amber Alert was put out, and then we had to drive back, and then till like 4 a.m. we were at the police station. I was like, at this point, because I was so tired of my parents' abuse and all this other stuff that was going on at home, CPS had gotten involved. It was that bad at home. They didn't do anything because the system's broken. Eventually I had to go back in with my parents. My parents thought that, you know what'll fix this whole music thing? Let's put you, let's double down on the religion. We're gonna take you to the mosque like every single day, and we're just gonna pray it away. That's not how this works. You can't strip me of my identity. That's just not how this isn't gonna fly like this. It's not how it works in this country. At this point, I'm just like, if I get to a point that I'm gonna move out, I'm gonna move out and never speak to you again. Foreshadowing, but eventually they tried doing the religious thing. I remember at one point I kind of was just like, it's almost like Stockholm syndrome, where at one point I was just like, okay, maybe they're right. Maybe they do have my best interest in mind. So from there I just went along with it. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do the music anymore. Labels trying to hit me up. They're like, my phone got taken away, so like they can't hit me up. Like it's my phone's off in a drawer somewhere. They're emailing me. I still have the emails I still have that email address now. Like there's emails that are like, at this point they called me KB, King Blood, because my band name at the time was like Blood of Kings, but because I was such an asshole getting into drugs, doing all this whole thing, nobody wanted to be in the band anymore, so they all left. And then I changed my Instagram alias to Real King of Blood because it was just who I...
Okay.
Yeah, that's where that name came from.
Okay.
So that's the backstory on the Real King of Blood thing. So they'd be like, yo, KB, where you at, man? Like, we have all these things that need to be mixed. Like, I'm going to have to, like, hire somebody to, like, mix these things. Because at this point, I'm making money doing the mixing, mastering thing. Like, I felt like fucking Warren Buffett making money because I'm getting PayPal'd, like, $100 a mix or whatever at this point, which is sick. Mm-hmm. And especially as like a 15, 16-year-old.
Definitely.
And it's all under the table. I just filed my taxes. I pay my taxes now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we are now adults.
We're now adults, so we do stuff. But like at that point, I'm like big baller, shot caller kind of guy. They're trying to hit me up. I'm like on this religious retreat thing or whatever. For we'll get into this more, but it was for like a 3-day retreat and then became a 10-day retreat, which was what I now know is a cult.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your face, like, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just remembered this recently that I was a part of a cult and I did not know, but basically it was like this religious thing, and I know that was a can of worms I just opened up.
No, I'm here for it.
But so it was like this 3-day thing, became a 10-day thing. Went on this religious retreat where we would basically go from mosque to mosque, spend our entire days in prayer, and like just basically submit yourself to God. I come back, I'm like, I basically went as this like ratty, didn't shower for weeks, greasy emo kid, came back in like traditional garb, turban, the whole nine. And my dad is like, he's super happy to see this. He's just like, man, my son has really changed. Like, this is really, and I totally bought it. I was totally about it. I was just like, yep, I have found God. This is my thing now. And I come home, and this was the kind of gut punch for me, was I came home, our house was laid out to where you walk in the front door, left is the kitchen, you go forward, it's the living room, you go immediately to the right, it's my bedroom. I walk into my bedroom, and where my guitars are hung up, there's nothing there. Where my computer is, nothing there. I had this wall that was full of like, one of my friends, we had what's called swag walls. Basically, like all the stuff that we would like acquire in the house. We would have the boxes for everything. So like, my brother was an iPad kid, so I would have like the box for the iPad there. I basically had like Monster cans, boxes of products, just stacked up on the wall. That thing meant a lot to me just because it was my sort of individuality, because my parents controlled the color scheme, the sheets, all that other stuff. This was like my thing. That was all gone too. That was when it sunk in for me. It was just like, to please my parents, I just gave up my whole identity. This kind of sucks. But I went with it for a little bit. And I remember like after this whole retreat, my dad and I would try to make amends. We would like go to like the baseball diamond at school, and we would walk around and talk. And it would start out as us talking, like trying to talk things out, but it would always turn into us arguing about why he took my stuff away. Like, why am I trying to become this like mold of who you wish you were? Because like every parent wants their kid to be like more successful than they were or whatever, but like I felt like my parents were trying to raise me into this mold of who they wish they were, and as a result stripping me of my own identity, and that kind of sucked. Because I tried to explain that concept to him. He's like, you're a kid, you don't understand. But I was just trying to get through to him that like, this is the time, your teenage years are when you start to develop your tastes, when you start to understand like who you are as a person. Not quite to the extent as you would when you become an adult, when you're in your 20s and 30s, still trying to figure stuff out. But like early on, you're like, okay, you know, like even now, I still listen to the stuff that I listened to when I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. A lot of people do. Mm-hmm. But my dad just didn't get that. And I still resent him to this day for it, where he just doesn't get it. I just wanted to be my own person, and he wasn't about it. I know that's really heavy, but it sucked. Then eventually the itch kind of came back to get back into music. This is all happening within the span of like 3 weeks too, so everything's like super condensed.
Okay. See, I guess I was imagining this from you from like 16 to 18 or something.
No, this is like retreat happened, or I get my face shoved into the pavement by a cop. And then I go to the mosque for like a few days, and then eventually get looped into this retreat, go on the retreat for 10 days, come back, and then like a few days of me trying to make amends with my dad. This is all like in a very condensed amount of time. Okay. A lot of stuff happens when you're a kid in a very small amount of time. You don't realize that. But yeah, so that happens, and then I'm like still trying to figure my own stuff out. I get the itch to get back into music, and I'm like, I know this is bad, but like, fuck it. So hop on the family computer, because like now I don't have a computer in my room anymore. I hop on the family computer, which is in like the far corner of the house. Log into my email. I see all this stuff coming in. I apologize to the guy. I'm like, hey, I haven't been around. I'm sorry. I'm ready to work again. Like, even if you don't have anything for me to work on, can you send me multi-tracks for something that's already been mixed just so I can kind of get the hang of it again? And basically, that's where I kind of got back into it. And then that's where I'm like, okay, now if I really do this, I really need to hide it, because like I'm having to live this double life now where to my parents, before it was like, okay, I'm a kid being a kid, but now I'm transitioning from being a teenager to soon becoming an adult. Now I really need to live this double life where to my parents, I'm like this picture perfect kid that's just going to go to college and do the whole thing. But my real identity is this music producer, and I have people that rely on me now, and at school I get to be myself to an extent. So that's where the double life kind of started, is after this whole retreat.
So how long did you have to keep that up for? What was that, like years?
That was for a few years.
Okay.
Eventually the move to also in the midst of all this, I know we're backtracking again, but in the midst of all this, I got emancipated. So my dad got so fed up of my shit right before this is right after getting detained, but right before going to the retreat. My dad filed for an emancipation, which basically means that my parents sign over all responsibility for me. That doesn't mean I go to a home. That just means I'm technically, like, it's basically like a legal disown. So, but I still lived at home, but they weren't technically like responsible for me. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Because typically what happens is if your parents give you up, you go to like a home or whatever.
Right.
But my parents just wanted to sign over whatever legal rights they had over me. So they did that. They just to kind of like show like, okay, if you want to be your own person, fine, go be your own person. But good luck trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But then I go on this religious thing, and then it kind of fizzled out from there. So I'm legally emancipated, but I still live with my parents, and like everything's fine and dandy for the time being. Because I don't know how the fuck I was going to sustain myself on $100 mixes and being 16 and then having to explain to every single adult, I mean, yes, I'm not 18. I can't legally sign for this, but I have this piece of paper that tells you that I can. That would have been hell. Right. But then the move down to Columbus happens. This is 2014, July. Summer 2014. This is right before going into senior year of high school. Moved down here. I also go dark from the label for a little bit because my dad, he's just like, we need a fresh start. I kind of agreed with him at this point because I'm like, okay, school's saying that I'm not going to graduate at this rate because I've been doing so poorly. They said I might as well just drop out and start and get a GED or stay for another year at this point. So I didn't want to have to go through another year of high school. So my dad was like, okay, we're just going to go and I'm gonna get back into this cable thing, because when we lived in Michigan, he wasn't doing the cable thing. He was working in home health care. He had a cousin. This is something I'm not really gonna get into because I know the specific details. But I guess he got like busted for like fraud in like $24 billion of Medicare fraud or something like that. But that's how my dad got out of the Michigan situation, and he got back into the cable thing. And then he got into the cable thing. He was out of state a lot, and that's what led me into starting to hang around with the wrong crowd because my mom wasn't really there to watch me. She was at home all the time. But just to kind of make amends from all the stuff that happened, we're going to move down to Ohio. Everything's going to be great. Fresh start, new place. they assessed my grades when we came down. I actually was ahead of schedule. Like I could graduate, I could like spend half the day in school if I wanted to. I ended up just taking extra study halls basically just to make up for it because I didn't want to get out of school early and deal with all that nonsense because I wasn't allowed to have a car for obvious reasons. So my parents have this distrust with me, moved to a new place, kind of helps a little bit because they're like, okay, now he doesn't know anybody, so maybe, you know, he can kind of set things right now. I'm terrified of police. I don't want to like get involved in all that again. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna be a good kid. Everything will be fine. I get my own room again. I'm able to do the music thing again, hide it a little bit better. Spend my senior year not really talking to anybody, not really involving myself with a lot of people. The few people I did know, I would show them my mixes and stuff. At this point, are pretty developed because I've been doing this for a few years at this point. Well, a couple years at this point. It feels like a lot longer of a time span because of the amount of stuff that's happened.
Right.
But high school comes and goes. Graduate, thankfully. Barely, but thankfully. What's my next move? Like, I don't know. These people that I went on this religious thing with, apparently they have this course that I could partake in, but it would require me to move to Indiana, and it would require me to live with them. I'm like, boy howdy, why not? So rather than going to college, I move in with a cult. Go to Indiana, live with these guys for a couple months. Realize I don't want to be there because this is some like batshit crazy type shit. We have to live. I had taken the money that I had earned doing music because at this point my parents knew, and they weren't just gonna tell me to give them the money. So I was like, here, I'll buy a car. Bought my first car, which was a BMW. Very bad mistake. I would highly advise against buying a BMW ever, especially as a first car. Drive to Indianapolis to live with these guys. First thing they do is take my keys away. Second thing they do is take my phone away. They put us on, they took our SIM cards out of our smartphones because they didn't want us on social media interacting with like the general world or whatever. We had to use like Motorola Razrs basically. So like these dumb phones. So we had to go to the dumb phones. They put us two to a room in this like, what is it? It's like a board house basically, where it was like this house, but they've like expanded on it so much. There's like these like really narrow hallways. I don't think any of this stuff is to code personally, but they had like they had this hallway that was all bathrooms with like pocket doors on them. It looked really sketchy, but I didn't think anything of it because I was like, there's no way my parents will put me in harm's way. And these guys are collecting a tuition, so they must be legit. They controlled what we ate. They controlled what time we woke up, what time we went to bed. We would fast all day, every day. They would we weren't allowed to go anywhere except the board house and the mosque. And if we went anywhere else, like the gas station or something, to get snacks with the allowance that we had, it would have to be with like a supervising student. So basically, my entire days were spent fasting, worshiping. I'm like skinny as a twig at this point because I'm like malnourished. Eventually, I get fed up, and I'm like, this is not cool. Now, in hindsight, I'm like, man, that was fucked up. It was even to the point that we weren't allowed to brush our teeth with like normal toothbrush, and that's why I had to get new teeth last year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Toothbrush and toothpaste. We had to use twigs to brush our teeth.
Now, if you already said this, I'm sorry that I missed
Yeah.
it. What were you there to learn? Like, what was it like the substitution of college for?
It was supposed to be so you could become, it's in Arabic it's called an alim.
Okay.
Basically, it's like who you would go to in a mosque, not the imam, like not like the guy that leads prayer, but it'd be like somebody that's like well versed in like how you should live your life. And then this is where it kind of gets culty, it's kind of like a pyramid scheme kind of situation, because your whole thing is like, sure, you're supposed to be like the guy that people go to for like spiritual advice and stuff like that, but at the same time, you need to plant the seed in people that like maybe this could be your lifestyle.
Okay.
Because you just basically spend your whole life traveling from mosque to mosque. You're not really making money, so like you're basically just a hobo nomad going from place to place.
Okay.
I know I might get a lot of like resistance and like bad things thrown my way for saying that about the religion my parents were a part of, but this I don't think represents the people as a whole by all means. This was just a very small sect, and it was a very specific group of people.
Yeah, you understand it was a specific experience.
I'm not saying that this is like the experience for anybody. Honestly, I would say if anybody approaches you like this, run the other direction, because this is not something that's cool. Religion is supposed to be your compass for life, you're not supposed to let it encompass your life, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Yeah. Totally makes sense.
I think it sets your moral values and standards. It should not be like, I'm going to shove this down your throat. You're just going to love it, and then you're going to pass this on to everybody else. I know some people treat it that way, but it's not.
Right.
It's not how it is. But basically, from here, I realized this isn't for me. This isn't the lifestyle I want to live. So within 2 months, a whopping 2 months, I realized, yeah, this isn't cool. I go to the dean. I'm like, this sucks. I'm out. He's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to bounce. So I go to his room, get my phone, get my keys, and bounce. I drive back. My parents aren't happy with me because they're like,
sorry, at least leaving was simple.
So leaving was simple. I was actually very nervous. I know I said I was going to bounce, but it was actually me crying. Like I was crying. I was like, I don't want to be here.
Right.
Because I don't know what's going to happen if I tell them I want to leave. Like, they have my keys. I was too afraid to call the police because, like, I don't know, what are they going to do? They're going to be like, I'm going to be like, these guys are shoving their religion down my throat. That's not a crime.
Right,
you know?
and they're also just probably going to be like, did you choose to come here? Like, you're voluntarily here,
exactly.
so, like, we can't really...
Yeah, and it's like, and then, like, if I bounce, it's like, you know, so it's whatever. So basically, move back. My parents are pissed. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. But right before I left, actually what led me to leave was, I probably should have mentioned this. What led me to leave was, you're going to have a blast editing this, by the way. I'm sorry.
I mean,
it's all over the place.
I don't really edit
them,
so
well,
we're just
whoever's listening is probably in for a treat because I'm all over the place. The only person that can put up with this is probably Lauren. I love you, Lauren. We're going to get married this year, I really hope. We're engaged, but...
Yes, that's incredible.
She's the only one I think that can decipher all this nonsense that I spew out of my mouth. But basically, and I forgot what I was talking about.
The triggering point for you to leave the
triggering point was because it's a mosque. It's open to the public. Anybody can come in. There's this one guy that would come. And because I'm a nerd, I was like nerding out over BMW stuff because I drove an E60 and he had an E39. And I was like, my E60 can crush your E39, which is basically my car was newer than his car.
Right, okay.
But his car is nicer than my car. So we kind of bantered back and forth. He was like the one person from the outside world, quote unquote, that I would interact with. We got to talking one day because he's my age. And he's like, and I asked him, I was just like, well, I was like, you're here, like... What do you do here? He's like, I'm in school. I'm going to school for computer science. I'm like, yeah, is that a cool gig? He's like, yeah, computer science, you know, right out of college, you can make like 75, 80K a year. Like it's a pretty good gig. I mean, you can even go for an accelerated thing and just get an associate's degree in it and just spend 2 years. And this is when I'm considering leaving. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is the thing to do. So I come home, enroll in school, for computer science, specifically in information security, InfoSec, cybersecurity. I take a few classes at Columbus State, some at OSU. I met somebody who was like, he worked at the Grove City Best Buy. And he told me, he's like, hey, since you're having to pay for your own college, because I'm just thinning out my savings at this point. My parents didn't really have savings for me. I was on FAFSA, and then whatever like else I had to pay out of pocket, I was paying out of pocket. he's like, if you need extra money, like, I could refer you. Like, maybe you could work at Best Buy. I was like, that's a good idea. I somehow convinced my parents, I don't know how I convinced them into letting me do it, but I convinced my parents into letting me work. So I'm working part-time at Best Buy. I got a job at Tuttle. This is where I met Lauren, actually, 2015. So I'm working at Best Buy, at school, doing poorly in school because I'm not very good at school. I only put my whole attention into stuff that I care about. So I was excelling in the computer science electives, but doing horribly in the general elects.
Right.
And while doing all that stuff just to appease my parents because they want me to get a successful job, and I just want some extra spending money so I can buy like whatever snacks or whatever. I'm also trying to figure myself out as a person too. So I'm like leading some sermons at the local mosque, doing stuff like that. Then I guess from there, then I got put on academic probation because I was doing so bad at school. They were like, "Hey, you have 1 semester to get your shit together, or you're out." Like, all right. Semester goes by. I'm still hiding the music thing from my parents. This is like 2015, 2016, 2017. Like, this is a very slow process at this point. I'm falling way behind on my general electives. I took U.S. history like 3 times in college. Still don't remember anything from that class, by the way. Doing horribly in math. Took out, I don't know, trigonometry or whatever they make you take in college. I don't remember what it was, but whatever classes I needed for math, I took those several times at this point. My 2-year degree was turning into a 3-4 year degree at this point, just to get an associate's. And I'm putting more hours in at work because I'm like, I need to get out the house. I need to get away from my parents. I'm tired of dealing with them. So this work was my outlet. School was my outlet from dealing with my parents, just to get away from home. 2017 rolls around, and then they finally said, "Hey, like, we got it. You can't be here anymore. School says this." So they kicked me out. My student email still actually works, funny enough. So I don't know if it was just like a temporary suspension where I was allowed to come back, but I never actually went back. So then my parents are absolutely fucking pissed at this point. So they're like, you need to get this shit together. I was just like, at this point, I just told them, like, don't worry, it's just for semester. I'll get this figured out. I'll enroll in a different school. I'll do whatever I got to do. I'm not allowed to get FAFSA anymore, so I'm going to have to pay for my own schooling at this point. My dad wasn't going to pay for it because at this point, he's just like, you got to figure your own shit out. So I put in more hours at Best Buy. And put in more hours in Best Buy. The relationship that I was also hiding from my parents starting to fall apart. That starts to fall apart. My mental health is on a decline. By all means, honestly, that relationship falling apart was probably the best thing that happened to me because not only was I bad towards her, that was just because I was becoming my father's son. The same narcissistic tendencies that my dad had towards me, I was putting upon somebody else. Nobody deserves that. And doing the music thing, trying to get better at it. I'm just doing projects as they come through. It became not mind-numbing to me. I was starting to lose my spark. But then a full-time spot opens up at Best Buy, and I'm like, okay, maybe if I work full-time and I get benefits, then I can move out. Maybe this will be my way to get away from all this. Full-time spot opens up. Some new guy, we're great friends now, but this new guy comes in. He gets the job. I lose my shit. This is in the dead of winter. I remember this is around the time that Lauren and I had started talking. So this is like, Lauren and I started, we started dating like 10, 16, 17. So October. Full-time spot opens up. I tried applying for it, didn't get it. I'm like at my breaking point, like suicidal breaking point. Lauren talks me off a ledge, and I thank her so much for it, because it's really like that was the turning point to lead me to where I'm at now. Because what happened at that night was she talked me off the ledge. The next morning, I was off work, I think, and I put my resume together, apply for every single job on Indeed that I could find. Eventually, one of them calls me back, and that's the company I work for now. They called me back. They're like, "What do you know about?" I don't want to get super specific, but what do you know about medical informatics? I'm like, I don't know anything. I work for $15 an hour at Best Buy fixing grandma's computer. Like, I don't know anything about the corporate world. I don't know anything about being on a salary. I don't know anything about the medical field. Then the guy said, we're also good friends because we have the same birthday. He ended up being my boss, but he said, well, why should we hire you? And I said, you could hire any IT guy off the street with a degree. I don't have a degree, but you won't find somebody as charismatic as I am. That's literally what I said to him. I am not charismatic by any means. But I told him, I was like, you need somebody with people skills and customer service skills, and that's what I have. That's what I can offer to you. Because, I'm in a world, I'm trying to enter into this world where there's like 30-somethings and 40-somethings and 50-somethings that have degrees and have done this for 15, 20 years. My boss graduated college the year I was born, So these are people that have made their livelihoods off of that, and here I am, just some kid in a suit that doesn't fit well, trying to talk my way into a job that I'm not qualified for. He said, we'll give you a call back, and then 5 hours later, I get up from a depression nap to a phone call where he's like, hey, so I'm going to extend you a job offer. This is what we can offer you. I didn't know you could negotiate a pay, so I didn't. I also didn't know that bonus structures were a thing. I just took the first offer that he threw at me just to get into it. I remember going to my dad, like while I was on the phone with him, thanking the guy for his time, and he said he was going to send me the info soon. And hanging up the phone, telling my dad about the job, and he's like, that's not good enough. That's literally what he said to me. He was like, you should have gotten paid more. You should have gone to school. This is not good enough. I went to my mom, told her, and she's like, tell your dad. Because my mom just goes off of what my dad says. And then I remember not talking to him for a few weeks after that. Because it was devastating. At this point, I was just like, I've had all these things thrown at my way. I was not allowed to go to school. My mental health was on a decline from a relationship I was hiding from my parents, because dating is also forbidden in that religion because you're supposed to do the arranged marriage thing.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm having to hide that from my parents. I'm having to hide my relationship with Lauren from my parents. Every time we hung out, it was always I had to tell my parents I worked late and then go hang out at her place. So that whole thing happens. And then that was where I realized I'm done spending my whole life trying to appease somebody that's not going to be happy for me. So, but because living in that environment's all I knew, I was too scared to leave. Because like from the outside looking in, you're like, well, why the fuck didn't you just move out? When you're in that situation, and this is what I couldn't talk to Youngblood about, was from the outside looking in, you're just like, okay, why don't you move out? The things you have to consider are like, I didn't talk about this yet, but I have 2 siblings. My sister is nonverbal autistic. My brother is also on the spectrum. I'm the eldest. I had the highest standards set for me, which is why my parents were so hard on me. My brother, basically, he got to do whatever he wanted. Like I said, he was an iPad kid. So he was allowed to do whatever, no repercussions. My sister, she can't take care of herself. So then where does that leave me? Like, my parents aren't going to be around forever. And I still think about this to my day. It keeps me up at night sometimes. Like, what's going to happen to my siblings? So all these things are looming in my mind, but I'm like, I can't let people tie me down. I need to do something for me now. So I started my job I got my job offer Valentine's Day of 2018. My start date was March 1st of 2018. I remember starting there. They realized that I was not even old enough to drink yet, let alone rent a car, but they had to fly me out to Chicago. And that was the first time I was able to at least find peace, I think, with myself. Because when I flew out to Chicago, they paid for everything. I was able to spend some time by myself with my own thoughts, not have to fake a persona or be told what to do, aside from obviously doing my job, where it's their job to tell me what to do. I'm still learning how to do the job at this point. But like, because I was too young to even rent a car, I was 20 at this point, I had to like Uber or Lyft everywhere. So I had to get my first credit card. Got my first credit card. I'm actually feeling like an adult now at the age of 20. Got a credit card, flew out, did the training that they asked me to do, and would spend time like by myself, without anybody screaming in my ear, without hearing my siblings, because my sister's nonverbal autistic. I've learned to tune out her noise, but she is kind of loud. So for once in my life, I'm sitting there in this hotel room that's completely paid for, overlooking Chicago, and I'm like, for once I found peace with myself. And then I was thinking to myself, I'm gonna go back to Ohio, and I'm not gonna live with my parents anymore. At this point, because I've been making so much money, not having to pay rent, not having to do like the traditional adult things of like moving in with a roommate and all that stuff, I had a bunch of money saved up because the money was coming in faster than I could spend, obviously, because my expenses were little to none.
Right.
It was just my car to commute to work and my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So I go home, put up with it for a few days, talk with one of my good friends, talk to Lauren about it. Lauren's just like, she's an absolute angel for this. She said that I can move in with her. So we agreed to that, but she had to talk me into it because all I had known for so long is just living with my parents, that like I was like, how do I just pack my shit up and leave? And knowing my dad, I knew that if I were to try to do that, some kind of fight would ensue. And I haven't had a physical altercation with my dad since I was, before I became an adult. So I don't know what was going to happen at this point. Because like when you're a kid, and even when CPS gets involved, they consider it just corporal punishment. There's like, okay, it's just their culture, in their culture, it's totally fine for the father to physically correct their son. That's the wording that they would use. But when you're an adult, it's just one man assaulting another man, So I don't know what to expect. I've had so many bad run-ins with the police at this point that I was too scared to ask for help. But Lauren talked me into going to the police station. I remember sitting in the police station like shaking because I did not want to go inside. Somehow mustered it up to walk inside, ask to speak with a police officer, and ask for a civil standby, which is basically where they escort you to your home, and they, as the name says, they do a civil standby where they just stand by while you get your stuff, and they'll be there in case something physical happens. So I'm terrified of dealing with the police. These guys were absolutely like heaven sent. They were so nice. And this is the first time I've dealt with like nice police in my life. And that kind of changed my opinion on like the police for me. Like I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Obviously, with the last few years, things have kind of changed for me a little bit more, but that's all another conversation. But when I needed them to be there, I realized that like I could stand up for myself, and there will be people there to support me when I need to stand up for myself. Walk in, my dad's like, "What the fuck's going on?" Like he's losing his shit. I had pre-prepared before going to the police station by going to Walmart and getting a bunch of those giant Rubbermaid totes just to shove all my crap in and leave. The week leading up to this, I'd sold off a bunch of my crap. Like I had like a little side business with my dad at this time where we would buy and sell Macs. So like we would travel. This was like the only few times where like my dad and I would spend time together was when we were on the road buying these pallets from universities. I would refurbish the computers, and then I would sell them. So that, and then I had a gaming PC business where I would like build computers for people and sell them. So like those were like my two little businesses I had. I sold off all my inventory. I had the cars were in joint name. So like I had two cars at this point. I had the BMW and I had a Honda Accord. Both of them were in my name and my dad's name, and I didn't want to have to put up that fight with them. I ended up getting a new car in my own name. And when my parents asked me about it, I was just like, meh, just wanted to switch it up. New job, new me. Like, I ended up getting a Civic hatchback. I was like, this thing's roomy. It's pretty nice. You know, it's just, I got to do something for myself sometimes. They're like, okay, whatever. They weren't happy about it, but, you know, they weren't going to stop me. I already bought the car. I wasn't going to return it. Like,
right.
Carvana wasn't really a thing yet, so.
Yeah.
I couldn't just go back to the dealership and be like, hey, my mom said I couldn't have this anymore.
Yeah, sorry, I got to give this back.
So I have a car now that's in my own name. I'm basically like getting my ducks in a row to be able to move out. I just was too much of a pussy to actually do it. And then finally Lauren talked me into going to the police station and getting the civil standby. Got all my shit, dumped it into the Rubbermaid containers. I don't know what kind of adrenaline rush I had going through me at that point, but like I had these 4 totes just lugging them into the car to the point that like Lauren and I had to both, like after everything had worn off, Lauren and I had to like team carry it because they were way too heavy for one person to carry. I don't know how I did it, but we did that. And I remember the last thing I said to my dad was, I need my social security card and I need my passport. And he like looked me straight in the eyes, lied to me, and said that he didn't have them. And the cop came in so clutch because they technically don't have the power to do this during a civil standby. But he said, "Hey, either you go get his passport and social security card, or we're going to be back for you."
Wow.
So shout out to whoever that officer was. You really saved my ass from having to get a duplicate made and do the whole thing. But I eventually got that stuff. Got my shit bounced.
So even just like catching up timelines now.
Yeah.
So you go through all that.
Mm-hmm.
You officially have now moved out of parents' house.
Yes.
You have separated yourself as much as you can. You officially made that decision of like, it is now time for me to live my own life.
Yes.
You move in with girlfriend for a little bit at that point in time.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming during this, you've got day job, you've got the new job at this new place. Are you still like doing the music thing? Like,
yeah, I'm still doing the music thing.
So so I guess my next question is like, when is it like, okay, cool, now I'm going to pick this music thing back up now that I've kind of got my life structured even just for myself a little bit. Obviously there's a lot of chaos in there. But you get through the chaos and then it becomes, I mean, because now you're sitting here now and you have a house and a studio and all that sort of stuff. Like, even just like getting to that point, like, when does that become, like, when do you, I guess here's the question. When did you feel the freedom to officially begin to pursue the music thing?
I think to preface that, another thing I forgot to touch on, which I touched on in the Youngblood podcast, was the ultimatum that I had with my parents before moving out. Because not only did I feel free in Chicago, it was this was prior to me getting this job. I had a guitar in my trunk. I had been seeing this girl at this time, and like sometimes I would like take it to her place, and I would play the guitar there and like kind of experiment more. This is like me trying to get my grips back, because remember how we talked about how I had those guitars taken away from me. They weren't on my wall anymore in Michigan.
Right.
I had this guitar. my parents eventually found it. They gave me the ultimatum that, hey, either it's the music, because they rediscovered that I was doing music again. So they found out again. They said either it's the music, or and you're out, or you give it up and you continue to be our son. And that kind of lit the fire under me to be like, okay, now I want to be my own self again. Like I want to find what my inner peace is, which led to me getting this job, which led to me going to Chicago, which led to me discovering inner peace, I would say, at that point in my life.
And then moving out.
Yeah. For me, it was when we first moved in together. This was in Hilliard. We had this little 2-bedroom apartment, and we had a roommate at that point. And when he moved out, it was just our apartment. I had talked to Lauren, and I was like, well, prior to that, what we had done was I had my work from home set up, because at this point I was working Wednesday through Saturday at my day job. Excuse me. Wednesday through Friday I would work. Through Friday I would work in the office. Saturday I would work from home. I had my work from home set up, and then on the other side, right next to it, I had a desk where I was slowly building out a studio setup.
Okay.
This is when I discovered Music Go Round was a thing. And I had bought a set of Yamaha monitors. Which I still have in my studio now, which I know I need to get rid of them because I have not much nicer speakers now, but I think I have this sentimental attachment to them now.
Yeah, of course.
I bought those speakers. I was still doing the label work, but now, like, for the first time in my life, I'm able to hear music that I'm working on through speakers without anybody screaming at me to stop. And got my own little Focusrite interface, like had an iMac, because we had the bigger, like the master bedroom, we had a walk-in closet. I converted that walk-in closet into a booth. So this is like the first time I felt free to do whatever. And
yeah,
Lauren,
you're in an environment where literally you can make the things you need to make to create music.
Yeah, and that's why I love that Lauren is my person, because she was 100% supportive.
Yeah,
she still is to this day. I'm so sorry, Lauren, that you have to put up with my impulsive gear purchases now, but it's your fault. No,
it sounds like she knew she was getting.
She kind of opened a can of worms, but basically that's where I felt like, for once, like, now I'm being celebrated for, like, round the clock. Lauren's there. She loves the stuff I'm working on. Like, at that point, she's like taking little videos on her phone. This is like, for once in my life, I'm actually able to just be myself, not have to worry about, like, having to hide it from anybody. I can work on it whenever I want, so long as my neighbors don't get pissed off. I can go buy whatever guitar I want. And this is the point where I just felt free. I felt free to explore my own creativity. And honestly, I feel like at that point in my life, I made the best music, because all that stuff that I had within myself for so long, these are pieces of music I haven't put out, just because I keep them so close to my chest. But this is the time where, like, all the stuff that I had held in for so many years was finally I was able to put it out. So I recorded it all over the span of months. Just the ideas were flowing. I would wake up at like 3 a.m. in like a cold sweat with lyric ideas. Like, it was like a renaissance period for myself, I would say. And that's where it led me to think, like, okay, we live in an apartment. I don't want to live in an apartment forever, and I almost want to spite my parents by buying a house. Like, I want to do this. I want to make this bigger. I want to get to a point that I can not just have to rely on the label sending me stuff to work on, or trying to write my own stuff. I want to start recording people. This is, like I said, this is 2018 at this point. Now I'm realizing, okay, now I need to make friends. I've lived in Ohio for 4 years at this point and have not made a single music connection because I was doing all this mixing stuff for this label. So now my entire focus is on saving up for a house. This is before the market got as bad as it did in 2020. Started saving up for the house. Started adding a ton of people on Facebook. Started going on Facebook forums because Ultimate Metal forum is dead at this point. Everybody's moved on to their own private Facebook groups to share stuff and like get work and do the whole thing. So I'm like mixing and mastering for some people on the side here and there. I'm like having some friends come over now because now I have the freedom to create. I have friends come over. We're like fooling around in the vocal booth, like putting together shitty rap songs just cause like
getting to enjoy music.
Just yeah, exactly. It's not this like it's not like this prohibition era like speakeasy type situation. It's just like now I can just do whatever and I can just worry about creating. I don't have to worry about what somebody thinks of me. Because my whole life I struggled with that. And that's at this point I'm finally able to just explore myself as a person. I've been through so many trials and tribulations up until that point. I don't care what anybody thinks of who I am as a person. All I care about is my art and hopefully getting something that people will enjoy. Or not even my own individual art, but at least being able to help people create art. So that's what my laser focus was going into that.
So you eventually buy a house.
Yes.
Which I remember when you first told me that, I was like, what, you have a house? Like, because I'm in that phase of adult where I'm like, wait, somebody has a house?
Yeah,
like, that's insane. And then you get to turn it into a functioning studio, which I'm sure everybody is now, listening to this is aware of that part of at least your story. Like,
yeah, and that's my old studio, quote unquote, like in the apartment. I called it King Blood Studio because the real King of Blood. That's a whole situation. But we were going to build a house originally. We were going to build in like the southwest part of town in Pickerington. We were going to build a house there, but like something about it just didn't sit with me really well. Just the idea of living in a cookie cutter neighborhood because I've spent so much of my life trying to be an individual. I didn't want to be like everybody else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So the whole idea of living in a cookie cutter neighborhood just did not vibe with me. And I knew that like we were going to make so many changes to the house anyway to make it what we wanted. Not really about it. So I told Lauren, I was like, all right, how about we don't just buy a house right away? How about we look like a condo or something? So the neighborhood I'm in now, found a condo that we liked, got in contract on it. Best thing that ever happened as far as how home buying goes. This on paper is horrible, but turned out better for us. What happened was there was a tenant that lived there. This place was owned by a landlady that lived out of state. The 30-day period for getting cleared to close and stuff comes up. The tenant hasn't moved out yet, and they refuse to move out. So now, like the landlady's coming and on talking through our agents. My agent comes to me and he's like, "Yeah, so they're asking like, is it possible that you purchase this home and then you just let them live there and then you just charge them rent?" I'm like, that sounds like a great idea, but no, that's not happening. I'm like, how? They're like, well, we need another 30 days. I'm like, you had 30 days to get these guys out. We ended up pulling out of the deal. And that same, 24 hours prior, the place I have now was listed for sale. And just kind of skimmed through the photos, twice as big as the place we were looking at before. Not only that, there's only 2 photos of the basement. One shot you don't really see much of. You kind of see the wall where now, if you're in the studio today, the TV is hung up on. There's a wood accent wall. There's another wall that's facing the drum room. And you don't see inside the drum room. You see an open door. You see where if you're into studios, you know what a room within a room concept is, where you have a room that's decoupled from the foundation, basically a double door. So there's a double door. There's an air gap in between. I see that air gap, and I'm like, I think I know what that is. I think it's a drum room.
That's cool.
I go on the county auditor's website, look up, this is very stalkery, I look up who owns the place. We're also good friends to this day. I look him up on Facebook. I found out he's an audio engineer.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. I also found out he's the only person that's owned that place. So he was like the first owner, and he built the whole studio in the basement. So doing a little bit of Facebook stalking, doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, figured out that he, when he purchased the place, he built this whole studio in the basement. He's a live sound guy. He's not really a studio guy. So he built this really just as a place to have a rehearsal studio kind of situation, like a drum room that people can come in, and maybe he'll record them on the side a little bit here and there. So over the years, he got to have people like Cooper from Harmless Habit, or Cooper and John from Harmless Habit. They used to practice there. Chandler Eggleston, great friend of mine as well, used to hang out there. They have great stories of hanging out in that space. I didn't know that there's this whole story behind this place.
That's interesting.
So I coming back to 2019, where I see this and I'm like, Lauren, we have to buy this place.
Oh yeah, that's like that aligns.
It's like literally everything we would need. We're in the right space, the right time. Like, we cannot skip a beat. And I was like, I need to have this place. I don't know what I would do if we missed out on this place. Asking price was like at the very top of our budget at the time. So I offered asking price. This is a point where a lot of people are offering, not to the extent now, but this was still kind of a seller's market where people are offering like maybe 5, 10, 20, 25K above asking price to get their way. I offered asking price. I told them I'm going to have a no remedy clause, which means if anything comes up, like structural or like water leaks or something breaks, like I'm not going to ask the seller to fix it. So we put in a no remedy clause. I'm going to buy this house as is. Not going to ask you to pay for a home warranty, because this is a point in time where you can still ask for those things. Nowadays, it's like, you as soon as a house gets listed for sale, it's already sold, basically. I do that, and then I write Ross, the owner of the place. I wrote him a letter. I told him, hey, my name's Unnus. I'm 21 at this point. I'm 21 years old. I'm an audio engineer. I would love to, at this point, he's discontinued using this place as a studio. I would love to turn this back into a studio, and carry on the legacy of whatever you have built here. And he ends up taking our offer.
It was so sick.
He ends up taking our offer, even though we weren't necessarily like there were higher offers on the place.
Yeah,
but he loved what we were about, and that the studio wasn't just going to turn into just some home theater and like whatever.
Right.
Like,
that's so sick.
So he took our offer. I was over the moon about it, and then like our suspicions were confirmed when we got to do the walkthrough while we were inspecting it, which is not ideal. Usually you want to do a walkthrough of the house before you put an offer in. We needed to move quick, so we just did that. Got the place, scraped together all my savings to get into the place. Like, Ross was also an absolute gentleman and let me buy the house with all the furniture.
Oh, wow.
And the washer dryer. Like, we would basically like just take whatever stuff we have, move it in, we're good to go. Because going from a 2-bedroom house to a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bathroom, 3,500 square foot place, it's going to be very empty. So,
I mean, I went from a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate to a single-bedroom apartment just for myself and had nothing.
Exactly. So it was still one of those situations where we moved there and we still had to like we didn't have it. Because we spent all the money on the place. Like, we basically just ate ramen noodles forever.
Right.
But that was another kind of moment where I realized I was free to do whatever. Because
that's
against all odds. Where like school counselors told me I wouldn't ever amount to anything, and my parents told me that they weren't proud of any accomplishment that I had achieved up until that point. I still bought a house. Mm-hmm. I still have a really well-paying job that I'm even now, after getting promoted a bunch, still am not really qualified for. But against all odds, against what anybody's ever told me, I still made it happen.
Doing those things and making a career out of
the music thing.
Music.
Yeah, like,
so before we start to wrap up,
Yeah.
I feel like, modern day everybody has a pretty good grasp on. Everybody sees, what's going on in the studio. We've kind of caught it up where it's like you purchase the house, you do everything you need to do to make the studio functional, and now it's like now everybody can see that stuff.
Yes.
Like we know all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the big questions I want to ask is like, and I feel like you shared a little bit of this with me when we got coffee, but like since the move out, since like you've done all this stuff we just talked about, all these wins, super well paying job, relationship, a house, career, passion, all this sort of stuff. Like since then, what's relationship like with parents?
I haven't talked to them.
So non-existent.
I've tried to talk to my mother. I haven't said a single word to my father. I've tried to talk to my mother, but it always goes back to her blaming me for tearing the family apart, and doing the whole thing, and just being a bad son, and how I need to submit to what they're doing, and make sure I don't get married without her approval, and all this other stuff. And that sucks. It's like you have all these wins, but I was telling this to my therapist the other day. There's no replacement for the approval of your parents. Like, I am infinitely thankful for everybody that trusts me with their art, and all the positive feedback that we receive, and even the negative feedback that makes me a better audio engineer. But it doesn't matter how many bands come to me and tell me that their mixes sound great, or their music is amazing, or how proud that like Lauren's parents are of me. Bless them, but and how proud Lauren is of me, or whatever, and what anybody else really says, because on paper everything worked out okay, but there just isn't a replacement for my dad or my mom just come in and saying, against all odds you made it happen and we're proud of you. So we have all these wins. Sucks that there's no relationship there, and it also sucks because I also do worry for my siblings' sake. But there's still that demon in my closet of like, I can achieve all my goals, but it's not all perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, that's the sacrifice you have to make if you want to be your own person and you want to be your own individual. Like, because if I followed and submitted into what my parents wanted, I wouldn't have been able to make an impact in this music scene or do any of the things that I wanted to. My whole goal at this point, because that's kind of the underlying goal of being an audio engineer, is being able to serve people through their music and being able to immortalize people's messages. If that's the sacrifice I have to make in order to make sure that anybody whose voice isn't heard is heard, I can live with that, because it doesn't matter all the things I acquire or all the other stuff. Like, when a person goes to their deathbed, they don't worry about the stuff that they wish they would have purchased. It's the stuff they wish they would have done. That's I don't know a single time somebody would have been like on their deathbed right before they take their final breath and they're like, man, I wish I bought a Ferrari. They wish they would have traveled more. They wish they would have done that one thing that they wish they would have done. I don't want to leave this earth without doing all the things I've wanted to do.
Dude, thank you so much for sharing all this.
Thanks for having me, man.
I really appreciate you being so open with the story and everything, and
when
sharing
it comes down to it, I'm sure there's somebody out there that might be going through something like this. I personally have never come across anybody who's gone through this kind of journey. But at the same time, I wasn't really open about it growing up when I was going through all this stuff. And I really hope that there is somebody out there that's able to listen to this, maybe come across it, maybe come across it through somebody that shares it, and it gives them a little bit of hope for their future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, I appreciate it so much, man. I've got one final question for you.
What's that?
And then we're calling it an episode. So I end every episode with the exact same question. So I will toss it to you. So, we just shared your entire story, entire journey. You were just saying, you hope that, that maybe there is somebody listening to this or that comes across it that maybe has experienced something similar or the same thing, and they can relate in some way and maybe find comfort through the story of finding who they are against those odds. So I'm going to ask you in this final question to speak to anyone who is listening, but I want you to pretend more so that everyone is listening. So my final question is, if right now everyone everywhere in the entire world were somehow listening to this podcast, listening to you speak, and you got to share something with them, what is it that you want them to hear?
Life is way too short to submit to somebody else. Life is way too short to submit to anybody else's will but your own. Because when you live and you die, you don't live for anyone but yourself. Who knows what happens afterwards? But as long as you're here, you don't know when you're going to leave. You don't know who's going to arrive. But make sure that when you go to bed every night, that you're happy with what you're doing. There are days that I've spent where that wasn't the case, and you don't get those days back. And you don't want that to be your last.
I love it, dude. Unnus, thank you so much, dude. I seriously appreciate it. I'm glad we got to have this conversation. And again, I appreciate you sharing everything that you have in this almost 2 hours of us sitting down and chatting.
Dude, thank you so much for having me, man.
Of course, man.
I absolutely love the conversations that we have, and I'm glad we were able to get this on tape.
Yeah,
and
dude.
Hopefully we'll have many more.
Oh, yeah. I guarantee there's going to be way more conversations just like this one that are just 2 hours of us sitting in a coffee shop or something somewhere. So before we officially say goodbye, do you want anyone who might be listening or watching to seek you out on the internet, find anything, find the studio around? This is the plugs and promotions side. We just got deep and we shared all these things. Now it's time to promote ourselves.
Yeah.
If you want anybody to find what you do, where can they find that stuff at?
Yeah, my studio, at least as of right now, blackmoonrecordings.com. I'm not the real king of blood anymore. You can just find me on Instagram and Twitter or whatever as @Unnus Latif, because I am my own person now. So that's where you'll find me. That's where you'll find my endeavors. And if you want to do anything with me, feel free to hit me up.
Dude, if you want to talk to him, just hit him up and you can get him to sit down with you for like 2 hours and just share everything.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Maybe this time I'll actually listen. I want to hear your story.
Yeah, see, now the next time we hang out, you can just sit and ask me all the questions, and I'll just open up all my cans of worms for you and share all the story of what Ross's life has been like.
Totally.
Dude, thank you again so much, dude. This was seriously a blast.
Thank you.
Dude, we did it.
Yeah.
We made a podcast, man.
Dude.
Thank you so much. That was like...
Okay, so if you liked what you heard in this episode, toss a share of the episode out there. Toss it in your IG story, tag the show, tag me, tag Unnus. Let us know that you enjoyed the story. And more so, follow us around social at WYDHpod. Of course, you can further support by hopping over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts and toss us a rating and a review. Of course, subscribe while you're there. Hop over to Spotify. Also, find the follow button there. Offer to record a full-length album while you're there for like a lot of money, and then promise it that you'll show it to your friends at the record label and get them signed and all that cool stuff. And then once they pay you, just ghost them completely. But the best thing that you can really do is tell somebody about the show. So next time that friend asks for a new podcast recommendation, you can tell them about this one with the bright yellow artwork. You can share these wonderful stories to more ears by doing that. But at the end of the day, as long as you watched or listened, I accept the support in any form. So as we say goodbye, I just once again want to say a huge thank you to Unnus for just getting as vulnerable as he did on the show this week. He really opened up about a lot of stuff, so that's I I don't know. It's stuff that's probably pretty hard to share. And I mean, you heard him explain it, a lot of that in the episode when he talked about this stuff. And he said that a lot of the stuff that he shared in this episode is stuff that he's currently working out in therapy. So, a seriously huge shout out to him for being open and talking about it all on a platform like this. But those are the things that often nobody but a therapist truly would get to hear about. So maybe as strange as it is to say, that's sort of what this show is all about in the end. So let's wrap it up. That is another episode in the books. 57 of these things. That is wild to me. But if you've been here since the beginning or you just checked this one out for the first time, whatever it may be, thanks for listening. Thanks for looking. And as always, I'll be back next episode with a brand new guest that you may or may not know of as they share their story that you've for sure never heard.